This is a BMC Unrestricted, or URS for short. And in this video review, I'm going to show you why I think it's one of the most exciting and capable gravel bikes you can buy right now. So you might have seen my first look on this bike a few weeks ago when it first arrived, and I went through all the details on this bike, link above if you missed that. But in this video, we'll talk about how it rides, how it handles my local trails, go through some key highlights on it from components and frame details, and give my verdict at the end of the video. If you've got any questions while you're watching the video, don't hesitate to put them down in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. But let's crack on. And the first thing to talk about is how the bike rides and handles, and this really is the highlight of the bike. And simply put, it's nothing short of excellent. It really is very, very good, and easily one of the most highly capable gravel bikes I've yet tested. It really is that good. It's all down to the geometry, which we'll talk about more in a moment. The geometry gives this bike excellent stability at high speed on loose gravel. It's a really planted bike. There's no twitching or nervousness about this bike at all. Really rock solid stable at high speed. And through twisting trails in the woodland trails I ride, it's just really agile. Got a short stem and a wide handlebar that gives the steering a nice amount of speed, so you can turn in from apex to apex with really nice agility. It's really good on rough, fast, rowdy descents with rocks and roots coming at you really fast, really planted. Got the front wheel further out in front of you than a normal road bike where it's much more underneath you. So it gives a real nice planted balance to the bike, but also that kind of agility for slow speed turns in the single track woodland trails that I ride on a frequent basis. The sort of trails where a mountain bike would be your obvious choice, but this bike handles them so well. It allows you to ride those mountain bike trails with the gravel tracks and then also the road as well, and do all that and not be compromised in any way at all. The reason for this amazing handling is all down to the geometry of the bike, which borrows very heavily from the mountain bikes the company makes. And a big difference from a road orientated gravel bike is a reach, which is much, much longer. So this distance here is way longer than most other gravel bikes and much closer to a mountain bike. But then, to ensure you don't need a Superman position to reach the hoods and drops, we have a very, very short stem. So basically you're fit from the saddle to the hoods and drops. It's about what you expect on a drop bar bike. So you're same fit, but the way it's achieved is very different. We have a wide flared handlebar as well, and a slack 70-degree head angle and a long fork brake as well. And what that does is a number of things. The front wheel will push much further out of you, so your balance between the wheels is much more centered. And when you're on a very steep descent, this is where you really notice it the most, because the front wheel is further ahead of you, not right underneath you, gives you more stability. The front wheel is not flicked around as much, doesn't feel as nervous, as twitchy, feels much more stable, much calmer, much more controllable in those high speed, quite sketchy situations where you can find yourself on a bike like this. There's no compromise in fit, as I found on long distance rides with road sections as well. In the hoods, drops, the reach, the stretch is nice. The only compromise with the frame really is there are 4 sizes. This is a size large, so a limited size range will be an issue if you're at the extremes of the height range this bike accommodates. But the way the geometry works off-road is nothing short of excellent, as I said in my intro, and I think it will redefine where gravel bikes are going in the future. And BMC certainly isn't alone in doing this mountain bike inspired geometry. A few other brands are doing the same. There's the Merida Silex, which is a good example. That evil chamois hanger, that mad mountain bike concept. And there's the Specialized Diverge and Cervelo Espero to a lesser extent as well. But I think this long front center, slacker, shorter stem setup is going to be a bigger feature of gravel bikes going forward. Aside from the handling and geometry, the other factor that really impressed me on this bike is the comfort. The seated comfort on this bike is incredible compared to most other gravel bikes which are rigid. This one has a soft tail. So we have the MTT micro travel technology, which are 2 rods inside here, rolling on sealed bearings and all sealed from the elements with a elastomer rubber type material. And it provides, according to BMC, a claimed 10 millimeters of travel. Not really suspension travel, it's not damped, there's no adjustment on it at all. Very simple, like a bump stop basically, with flex and the carbon rear stays to allow it all to move. You don't really notice it moving so much as you notice the lack of impacts and vibration coming through the saddle to your bottom when you're riding off-road. And the comfort and smoothness it offers off-road, whether in the saddle or standing up, is just insane. It really is really good. The first ride on this bike, I was absolutely blown away. Riding my friend Chris, and I was just laughing out loud at how smooth it was on some of my trails that I know really well, and I know are really rough, like riding the Arenberg in Paris-Roubaix, really rough, kind of have you bouncing out of the saddle, really difficult to stay on the power, on the gas. But on this bike, I was in the saddle, staying on the power, and just laughing at how easy it made riding these quite rough trails. So MTT has been a really impressive feature of this bike, and it's so good in fact that going back to a normal gravel bike afterwards with a rigid rear end is quite tough to adapt to, because you get really used to this system. It really works so well off-road, and for my bad back it really definitely helps. And it works in the saddle, and it also works when you're standing up as well. And as well as comfort, it also gives you a bit more traction on tricky slippery climbs with rocks and roots, gives you a bit more traction from the rear tyre, so it definitely helps on trickier climbs. And of course we also have a D-shaped carbon fibre seat post as well, gives a bit more comfort at the back. And you can, and this is really neat, swap it for a round 27.2mm seat post or a drop post, so that's a neat option. Unfortunately, there's no similar MTT technology on the front end, but luckily you have these bendy things which are really good at absorbing vibrations from rocks and roots. But riding my local trails for the last few weeks, I found the front end not as jarring or harsh as I expected. The balance front to rear is reasonably good, but I would love a similar MTT rear end on the front end somehow, in the handlebar or stem, just to give a bit more capability when you are riding quite rough trails. But like I said, the balance is reasonably good, and it isn't like a real difference between the front end and the rear end. The seated comfort is excellent, and I think depending on the way you ride and the trails you ride, that seated comfort, being able to sit down through rough trails, is probably more important than the front end being cushioned. But we've got a specialised diversion in that front suspension, but no rear suspension. We've got the BMC doing a rear suspension sort of, but nothing at the front. So I think the next step is clearly having both. Front and rear suspension, front and rear dampers, whatever you want to call it, is the next step in the evolution of gravel bikes. So something that delivers a bit more. I guess one way around it on this bike, although you can't because of the stem and integrated routing, is to put a flex stem on the front to give that nice balance front and rear. Of course, wide tyres are good for cushioning off-road too, and these 40mm wide WTB Radar tyres are an excellent choice. So good comfort off-road from the big volume, and also good grip off-road, and a fast rolling on hard pack and a road too. We've got nice tightly packed blocks in the middle, bigger shoulder lugs for cornering grip, just an all-round good fit and forget tyre, and they look really good with tan sidewalls as well. And also from WTB, providing excellent comfort, it's a really nice saddle, got on really well with that. Nice broad platform, channel in the middle, bit of flex on the rails as well, so really good option. Also good for comfort is the Eastern EA70 flare gravel handlebar. It's not an extreme flare, just enough, give it more control on the drops. Although the hoods are canted over quite a bit, but it's not too bad, and nice grippy bar tape as well. Other component highlights include the DT Swiss gravel wheels, nice broad aluminium profile, and easy tubeless with WTB tyres. They came with inner tubes. I fit some valves, some sealant, and a tyre popped up with a normal track pump as well, so no issues there. Don't lose air over time. So really nice, a solid, reliable wheel set, look good, nice sealed bearings as well. And then we have the lesser spotted SRAM Arrival 1x group set with mechanical gear changes and hydraulic disc brakes. It's quite a few years old now, and it's been quite a few years since I rode a bike with it, but it still works really well. We have a wide range 1042 cassette, 11 speed, with all the range you need for off-road gravel riding, and nice smooth steps from the 10 up to 42. Powerful hydraulic disc brakes, helped by a bigger 180 rotor on the front. You normally get a 160 on a gravel bike or road bike, but a 180, another mountain bike influence, gives a lot more braking power off-road with no risk of locking the wheel up, just a bit more confidence when you're riding off-road at high speed. And I think that's another nod towards the future of gravel bikes, as the geometry pointed to earlier. The hoods do look bulbous and clunky compared to the latest ETAP offerings, it has to be said, but the height and the square shape does a really good job of securely anchoring your hands into the hood when you're riding over rough terrain, and your hands and arms are bouncing around, really locks them into place and gives a bit more security, a bit more confidence when you're riding off road. So not actually all that bad, so don't judge them by the looks alone. Try them and you will be impressed. So the group set, while it's showing its age compared to the latest GRX or ETAP Wi-Fi, it still works really well, and I wouldn't discount it because of its age. It does everything you want from a gravel bike, and it's reliable as well. And all these parts hang off a frame that I think looks really good. I love the mellow yellow paint job, which is very refreshing in this era of all black frames. Let me know what you think down below. And a lot of smart details, as I come to expect from BMC. Starting at the front, we have these rubber end caps on the fork dropouts to protect them from damage, rock strikes and so on, and a rubber bash guard on the bottom of the down tube. We also have discrete mud guard and rack mounts inside the fork and frame, and accessory mounts on the top tube and a third bottom cage mount on the bottom of the down tube. The frame is one by only, so there's no fitting a front mech, but unless you're buying a frame set and building yourself, the bikes are only sold with one by, so it's not so much of an issue. But if you're looking for a gravel bike and you're turned off by one by, then it could be an issue for you. The internal seat clamp works well, no issue with the seat post slipping at all, and we get a GoPro computer mount integrated into the stem and handlebar. So while the BMC Unrestricted borrows heavily from the mountain bikes when it comes to geometry and the MTT technology at the back, it's pure road bike at the front with the same integrated stem we see on the Road Machine and Team Machine road bikes. So inside this massive head tube, we have a special flat-sided steer tube, and that allows space for the brake hoses to go inside the frame. So brake hose goes underneath the stem, underneath the cover here, inside these spaces, and into the head tube around that special steer tube I mentioned. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with gear cables because gear cables don't like going around tight corners, so that is routed around the head tube and into the down tube port there. Of course, if you had ETAP or Di2, you wouldn't have this cable here, and that would disappear. You have a really clean front end. The big question this system poses for me is whether it's a step too far for a gravel bike. Do gravel bikes need an integrated front end like it's becoming the norm on top end aero road race bikes? And I think there are pros and cons to it. Even apart from the cable here, the front end is very clear cables, very uncluttered. So that means fitting a bar bag, a handlebar bag is really easy. No interference at all, so that's a good thing for bike packing adventures. And the obvious downside, of course, is you're tied into the stem. You can't easily change it for another brand or put a flex stem on there perhaps. And for maintenance, well, you've got to take it all apart, you've got the cables hosed inside, so maintenance issues perhaps as well. So pros and cons for sure, but let me know what you think down below. So let me start summing up my review by giving you some good and bad points about the BMC Unrestricted. In the good list, it's definitely the geometry and the comfort, which gives amazing smoothness and handling for riding really fun off-road trails. One of the best gravel bikes in that regard. So really points where gravel bikes are going, I think, in terms of geometry, and that MTT technology does work really well. And I love the way the bike looks, all the angles, the shapes, the lines, and the colour as well, and all the cool details, like the bump stops on the fork dropouts and a down tube there. And also the fact we have a big 180 rotor on the front for a bit more off-road control. And then on the downsides, well, it's one by only, which for me personally is not a problem, as I really like one by. But if you don't like one by, then you can't fit a front mech, and it might be a factor in choosing a bike or not choosing it. The tyre clearance at 45 isn't the most generous. And then the choice of 4 frame sizes also isn't the most generous as well. So that's another issue. And then there's the price. This model costs £3,800 with SRAM Rival 1x group set. And it's well spec'd for money. There's nothing I'd change on the bike at all. But that giant Revolt I reviewed last year, link above if you missed it, cost £3,500 with carbon fibre wheels. So the giant is exceptional value for money compared to this one, and that's something else to consider as well. So what's my verdict on the BMC Unrestricted? Well, it's a big thumbs up really. It's a really highly impressive and highly capable gravel bike that really shines the more technical, the rowdier your local trails. So woodland trails, mountain bike trails, this bike is blooming fantastic. It really is a lot of fun. That fusion of mountain bike geometry and technology with road bike DNA is a match made in heaven. And I think bikes like this really point to the future of gravel bikes, giving much more capability riding off-road, moving further and further away from the road bike DNA to bikes that really work well off-road. And really, I think the best way to sum up this bike is if you're not yet ready for a mountain bike, this might be the next best thing. Anyway, that's my review of the BMC Unrestricted. Hopefully you found it useful and interesting, and if you did, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you so much for watching.